In past episodes of this series, we covered the strike that paralyzed Ecuador for over 2 weeks and forced neoliberal banker Guillermo Lasso to back away from the implementation of a pro-mining presidential decree that would have meant social and ecological devastation. We also covered the two fundamentally different worldviews on each side of Ecuador's indigenous revolt and class struggle. On one side of this conflict, an indigenous movement that sees nature as Mother Earth, a living mega-organism on which we thrive on a symbiotic relationship. When presidents and governments have fallen to on the other side, we have a government that is imploding, shocked by corruption cases, in dire need of funding, under heavy pressure from multilateral organisms like the World Bank and International Monetary Fund, world powerhouses like USA, China, Canada, and Australia, and powerful mining corporations worth Ecuador's GDP many times over. In this chapter, we visit a town in the Andes to see how mining companies indirectly control areas for which they have no legal possession. This is the voice of the resistance. As the market appetite for raw materials keeps increasing, new areas fall in control of mining corporations. Indigenous and farming communities are the last frontier that the machine still has to conquer. Striving for infinite growth to satisfy the infinite greed that pumps our industrial wheels on a small planet with limited resources. Around the world, families and tribes are displaced, and entire areas are contaminated by mega mining projects. While the size of the Amazon jungle, our planet's lungs, shrinks at an alarming rate, and with it, its biodiversity. According to scientists at the UN Convention on Biological Diversity, every day up to 150 species are lost. One of the areas at the thick of the mining conflict is Ecuador, a country that just a couple of decades ago was known as an island of peace. A country that woke up on October 22nd to shocking news, which is saying a lot for a country that has descended into a deep degree of lawlessness. Yet the murder of a pregnant woman just couldn't go unnoticed. Eventually, the anti-mining movement issued a communication that shed more light on what had happened. Alba Bermeo Puin, who was in her 5th month of pregnancy, was shot in her chest in a Sicario-style murder, in the context of a recent dispute about a sized truck full of raw gold material. It is presumed that the murder of the young mother and activist was payback, because of the timing of it and since nothing was stolen at the crime scene, nor anyone else was attacked. This is the 3rd armed assault in a month, against an activist who defends the biosphere. In the town of Mogeturo, Azuay, in the south of the country, the town is resisting both legal and illegal mining. All the victims have been women. It is a public security matter now. Illegal armed structures are openly attacking anti-mining activists who have been defending the town and surrounding nature against a Chinese mining project for 20 years now. It had become obvious that with its absence, despite open processes and constitutional principles protecting the activist, the state had allowed the murder of the mother-to-be. And while the activists won a case in 2018 ordering the closing of the mine, there are still illegal extracting activities happening at the mine. To add fuel into the fire, Javier Vera, the Minister of Energy and Mines, has been accused of serious charges, such as having a fake handicap ID in order to get discounts in several monthly bills. He is also accused of selling key posts for up to $2 million each. The minister was called in front of the National Assembly, and several audios like these were presented for the country to hear.
It all started in the month of May, when more than $150,000 were delivered into the hands of Xavier Vera, Minister of Mines and Energy, in exchange for the job of coordinator in Inababura.
A coordination post for the Ministry of Energy and Mines will offer numerous chances to profit from legal and illegal mining. In fact, the jobs mentioned in the audios are posts that will effectively control Imbabura, an area in the crux of the mining conflict. Here, corruption is well known, and pro-nature activists are not only at risk from organized armed groups, but also by the actions and lack thereof of the state's corrupted agents, like Mr. Zamora, who allegedly paid $150,000 to obtain said job. We visit Buenos Aires Imbabura, an area covered by the post that was sold for $150,000. This is a town that in a very similar manner underwent an all-out assault, first by illegal miners and then by legal ones, all while dealing with a government that is inefficient at best and corrupted at worst. We spoke to some of its leaders.
We want peace and tranquility, to be left alone with our river and clear water. Our air is still clean because, other than that, Mother Nature provides us with our food.
La Madre Tierra es la que nos provee de todos los alimentos.
Franklin Romero is a community leader in the town of Buenos Aires Imbabura in the north of the country. This campesino town is one of the icons of the anti-mining resistance movement. They are currently battling Andean Exploration and Mining, an Australian transnational company.
Ya nosotros laboramos la tierra y sembramos nuestros alimentos.
We labor the land and plant our food. Furthermore, here in the farmlands, we produce most of the food so people in the city can survive.
Ahorita en el momento actual tenemos aquí asentada una empresa Andean de capital australiano.
At the moment, we have an Australian company called Andean, which has never stopped operating, and their machinery is permanently moving in and out of the area. The government is at the company's disposal. They can send cops at will. The police and the army are both at their disposal. So that makes us uneasy. Even our own roads we cannot walk in peace.
Entonces eso es un malestar para nosotros, donde incluso en nuestros propios caminos, donde en nuestras propias carreteras no podemos caminar con tranquilidad.
But what is the essence of such a social conflict? What gives local communities the right to get in the way of mining concessions? Several principles in the 2008 Ecuadorian Constitution give nature rights, especially water, Article 12. This is an indigenous principle called sumak kausai, or good life, which is recognized as an unalienable right, Article 12. And there is a measure of protection and voice for local communities, which, as stated in Article 57, are legal stewards of ancestral lands, and theoretically have to be informed and consulted before any project can take place. But that consultation with the communities has not taken place, and that detail, root on a constitutional principle, has been used by many communities to close mining projects, like it happened in the town of Mogeturo, Azuay, where Alba Bermeo, an anti-mining leader, and her baby-to-be were shot on October 22nd.
Ya, las empresas mineras, un requisito para...
A requirement for the mining companies is to conduct a previous and informed consultation, which they never did. They never came to show, informed us, or consult us to see if the town decides to have mining projects or not.
Sara is a fictitious name for a local leader who, despite her youth, is one of the most outspoken activists and carries the conversation when the community gathers to discuss matters around the fire.
Jamás lo vinieron a hacer, y de hecho ellos vinieron.
As a matter of fact, they just came here with the police and attacked us to try to access our territory. We are fully aware we have to be previously consulted, and we were not consulted. So we made our own poll with the help of the county board, and the no to mining option won. Yet, the Hanring Corporation came and took possession without any consent by the population.
Sin embargo, la empresa Hanring es la que se vino y se posesionó sin permiso de la población, a la fuerza.
Ecuador is a country that prides itself on its natural beauty and has a constitution that binds the government to protect nature, especially water sources. However, over the last 16 years, several administrations from all kinds of political backgrounds have ignored, or to an extent even colluded, against some of those rights. This is why Buenos Aires in Babura, like many other local communities, have been putting up a fight for many years now. Correa, who was 10 years in power, Moreno and Lasso, has absolutely ignored these rights. So yeah, effectively, nature and community rights are not respected at all. They talk about Ecuador's constitution as a vanguardist document that gives nature rights. Yet, 14 years have gone by and just recently lawsuits have passed, recognizing nature's rights. But as far as governments go, they have carried out any project they wanted. Mines, oil rigs, agro-industrial and hydroelectrical projects, without consulting anybody or respecting nature's rights. The Ecuadorian Constitution also grants the right of resistance, Article 98, and give indigenous communities ownership of their lands, Article 57. Article 14 especially states that the state must warrant the preservation of the environment and ecosystems. Also compels the state and its representatives to prevent and repair ecological damage.
Por ejemplo, este caso de las puertas giratorias es muy común, prácticamente, digamos, se puede...
We can identify tens of government functionaries that have gone on to work for mining companies. That is on one hand, and on the other, we can prove that the Chamber of Mining is the one that dictates Ecuador's mining policy. The proof of that is Presidential Decree number 151. The derogatory of that decree, Guillermo Lasso's mining doctrine, was one of the demands of the strike, because it extends a red carpet to the mining industry. It was in fact right by the Chamber of Mining. Mining companies are some of the biggest in the world. To name an example, BHP Billington, which operates a number of concessions here in Ecuador, is worth 2 times our gross domestic product. So they are bigger than our country. They have more money than all of our countries combined. With that kind of money, buying government functionaries is like nothing. They could afford secretaries of state and presidents. In fact, they do. Thanks to internal judicial affairs prosecution documents, we know that companies like the Australian Hanrin, owned by Rebecca Reinhardt, bought and paid for judges, obtaining a rule that allowed them to enter the Buenos Aires area. So the interference of mining companies in the government to control territories is very considerable. What in Peru is known as the mining police state, we are already experiencing here in Ecuador. Mining companies exercise absolute control in some areas, where they control the police, the army, the courts, and even the control agencies. The clear example are Buenos Aires in Babura and Tundaime in the Amazon.
Caso concreto, Buenos Aires o Tundaime en la Amazonía.
Life changed drastically for the town after gold was found by some foreigners that employed Don Luis as a guide.
Yo también me fui un tiempo que vinieron unos a buscar una.
I went with them once. They were looking for gold samples. We went down that way. They picked up little samples of mud and put them in bags.
Ellos sacaban unos loditos y nos ponían en unas fundas.
Entonces eso fue un conflicto muy grande.
So it was a big conflict here we started to see. Alcoholism, prostitution, drug abuse, crime, armed robberies, assaults, even deaths here in the town.
Hubo muertes aquí en el centro poblado.
The conditions inside the mines were infrahuman. Life was really hard for the illegal miners, and also for the inhabitants of this campesino town. Their life has been completely disrupted.
Tanto así que ya empezó a haber demasiado problema y demasiada delincuencia.
You'll see dead bodies coming out of those mines. They kill each other, I guess for control of the mines, because there were armed groups, which initially really scared us. But then we said to each other, this is about defending our homes, our communities, our town, and not subject ourselves to those people. So at that point, we got together, the people from our town, and started to demonstrate and block the road.
Marchas, hicimos plantones.
It was particularly hard to deal with the fact that the authorities that were supposed to protect not only the rivers and mountains, but the community and the people from the area were evidently accomplices of the illegal miners and the mining company.
La gente incluso aquí hacíamos como lo venimos haciendo es la gente.
Eventually, the community got together and took action, together as we always do. Initially, when the illegal miners took over, starting by the illegal brothels, they were located right next to the police control. We tried to kick them out and destroy those structures to try and control that activity, but it was of no use. There was too many of them, and we had no support from the authorities.
For 2 years, the community had to live under fear, or being assaulted and robbed, and having thousands of foreigners taking over their town. After a number of violent robberies, things started to get out of hand.
Y con las marchas y la unión del pueblo, pues sí, hubo un tiempo que los mandamos sacando. Les hicimos hasta un paro.
We even started a strike blocking the only road in and out. We closed the road for about a dozen days, and while we were asking for the state's help, telling them we have them blocked, no food is going in, the miners eventually started to leave on their own because they had no fuel and supplies. They even sent death threats to us, but we remained steady, telling them that we were only defending our lands and our town.
Les pedíamos que se vayan, que estábamos defendiendo nuestro territorio y que ellos eran los invasores.
The communers forced the illegal miners to leave and also cleared the town of any newcomer product of this new gold fever. Yet on the night of August 3rd, 2021, the area was occupied by police and the army to allow for the mining company to pass equipment and supplies through the town streets on its way to the mines. This was a tough blow for the activists.
Sometimes we feel down, with our guard low, because we have discussed how we are facing a monster with a lot of power, where they have the money, they buy the prosecutors and the judges. We are fighting a giant.
Here the authorities and justice don't work. Can you imagine? When there are political campaigns, you see them come here and even try to hug the commoners, but then they forget about us.
Lo más triste de esta lucha es que aquí no existe justicia.
The saddest part about this fight is that in Ecuador, there is no justice. We have to endure bullying sometimes by the military and the cops. We also have to endure the illegality and injustice of the state itself.
¿Cómo se puede decir? La ilegalidad, la injusticia del propio Estado mismo.
Ecuador's mining designated areas are approximately 8% of the total national territory, 2.3 million hectares, of which 1 million hectares, or 44% of the total concessions, intersect with protected areas of different kinds, which the Ecuadorian state is bound to protect. Additionally, 24% of the total mining concessions sit atop archaeological sites, which according to the law can be another cause for having its permits revoked. To activists, this clear contradiction only shows how intertwined the Ecuadorian state and transnational companies really are. Another concern for the villagers is the apparent association of some criminal elements that used to extort both the town and the miners with the Australian mining company, which according to several local villagers now employs them as security guards. They were armed, dressed as civilians, with large rifles and all that gear. They will stand there allegedly in charge of keeping order. They will charge you money to let the cars and truck pass. If you didn't pay, they will not let you pass. And if miners didn't pass, they couldn't work. So you said that when the mining company came, those individuals returned? That same crowd came back to help the company pass the town and its activists, working as security guards for Hanrin, the mining company. Private security guards? Private security guards. They come as private security guards. We also hear the rumor that for those of us who are defending nature and Mother Earth by opposing the mine, they told us that any day now they will either jail us or have us silenced, so that way we'll stop bothering them. As we try to go to the mine, we were stopped by cops at a checkpoint. They say that a military raid to the mine was taking place at the moment, and that nobody was allowed to go up there. And as we were going back to town, some off-duty cops hitchhiked a ride with us. After talking for a while, he agreed to talk, but not to show his face or body. So I proposed that he interview me. That way he could make sure that his face will not be compromised. He then told us some hard truths.
As a member of the ranks, how do you feel knowing that you capture someone and then you have to let them go? And who lets them go?
As a police agent, I feel frustrated. Many times we risk our lives, confronting people who operates outside the law. We catch them and then take them in front of the authorities, in this case judges. I am not generalizing or talking about everyone, but a group of them, you take criminals to them, but sadly, corruption looms large. So Ecuadorians talk and say the police doesn't do its job. Then we arrest them and they let them go. But you see, the case is that we've done our job and we did it professionally. The problem here is the judiciary. They judge and are in charge of imparting justice.
Lastimosamente la corrupción es grande, ¿no?
Eventually we got to town. It was still morning. I was having breakfast and feeding some doggies while sitting on the bench near the park, where I noticed some people evidently trying to find a ride out of town. They seemed hungry, so I invited some of my bread and bought some coffee for them. They then agreed to also interview me, to make sure they could protect their identities. They were, after all, illegal miners, escaping from a military raid, aiming to put them in jail. It was hard, it was very difficult.
What did you guys go through?
It was hell.
Hell?
Extortion, shootings.
Yo he salido de la casa hace 3 meses ya y la verdad todavía no avanzo a llegar con $1 a la casa.
I left home 3 months ago and I have not been able to bring a single dollar home. Precisely today, some people dressed as military went up there, saying they are military, but I don't know if they were sent by the company or by the state. They kicked us out and confiscated all of our goods, our rocks, and our plastic houses where we live in despite the cold were burned. So this is the bag with my stuff. I was able to bring it down. This is all I carry, and unfortunately, that is all I have to bring back home.
Aquí está la maleta que nosotros hemos bajado, o sea, lo único que cargamos es eso, y lamentablemente con eso tengo que llegar a la casa.
So I figure that for you as a miner working in the illegal mining industry, are you conscious that mining destroys the environment?
Ya, mire, si nos ponemos a ver que destruye la minería ilegal el medio ambiente, o sea,
look, if we really look into whether illegal mining destroys the environment or not, illegal mining affects maybe 10% of what the big companies do. The big mining companies say that they recycle and then there is no contamination. But everything contaminates, even a car contaminates, and I am aware of that. It's not that we contaminate, but that we destroy nature, the mountains and all that. Because how do we contaminate? By digging underground? There is no contamination there.
He was saying that only some people try to process the material, but most of the illegal miners are trying to get the rocks away from here.
Well, that's the authorities' fault. Because if they will allow us to get the rocks out, nobody will process the rocks here. But since we can't move the rocks out, some people get to process the rock there. Again, if they will let the rocks be transported to processing facilities, the people will process them there.
To carry the gold instead of the rocks when they leave. Another point you bring out is that because of the sheer volume and the fact that they would process the rocks there, the big mining companies will contaminate more.
Of course they'll contaminate more, because they will open roads and make large camps that contaminate and affect even more.
I figure that at the end of the day, the state wants to collect from the mining companies while you give them nothing.
Of course, mining companies pay the state, yes, but we are also willing to pay any tax we have to pay the state. It only needs to be regulated, and we will pay anything we have to pay. After witnessing so many irregularities, we were scheduled to meet the Minister of Anti-Corruption, led by Luis Verde Soto, who has a background as a scholar, and he's also the first anti-corruption Secretary of State. We wanted to show him some of the testimonies and get some insight and perhaps even some answers, Like, for example, who buys all the material that the illegal miners get out of the ground? Yet we were about to get a dose of reality.
He declined to be interviewed because he didn't want to interfere with the competence of the state attorney, the general attorney, who he said should be investigating the cases of presumption of corruption that we've witnessed. We've clearly witnessed cases where they were said that by a cop that the cops were paid by the mining company. He said that the judges were paid by the mining company. So what they do, according to the minister, is that they correct macro policies, not cases. So the small cases we witness should be handled by the general attorney's office. Yet, if they find a pattern of corruption, I don't really understand what's going on here, because what we've seen seems to tell that story of systemic corruption. Yet here we are in the Ministry of Corruption, Anti-Corruption, telling that story, and we were said no, not having a macro view of it, which is, I guess, their competence, to see the pattern of corruption in all that area. Because not just the cops, not just the judges, everything in there seems to point at the region being under control of a mining company that doesn't have permits to operate in that area.
hard task of defending their town seems to be already taking a toll, but they understand what is at stake.
La lucha aquí en mi pueblo ha sido tan
The
dura.
fight here in our town has been so hard. We have been through such hard things that yes, there have been times when we have been disappointed. Because you fight without being paid or nothing. Yet the first thing the mining company did was take our names and taint them, saying we are paid by the illegal miners, that we are getting paid to resist. And that is a lie. We fight with our own resources and our own conviction of defending our fields.
We only ask everyone to understand and be conscious of our planet's destruction. To those living in the cities, we want to tell them that we are the protectors of the primary forest areas. We keep our rivers clean and clear of contamination. And we do this for all of humanity, not only those fighting here. In my opinion, what we feel is impotence to realize that us here from the farmlands, not being super educated, we could see the negative consequences clearly. And the big cities, full of educated people of all kinds, cannot see what is coming for the future, which is destruction, and we are already feeling those effects.
que es la destrucción, y ya estamos sintiendo esos efectos.
We know what we are defending. They are strong, and they have money. Yet we know we are right. We have our principles. And one time before, we agreed that we'd rather die fighting than seeing our environment destroyed, and then we'll have to face a slow death, because that's what's coming.
Yo creo que si todo el pueblo...
I think that if everyone fights, we can win.
si podríamos ganar.
How?
With the law and with people's and communities' direct actions.
Con la ley, o con hechos de las personas, comunidades.
Si esto se acabaría con las empresas mineras que nos
If this
ahorcando,
matter ends with the mining companies winning and taking our daily lives, we would have to immigrate and go to the cities and become part of a huge crowd. As you know, in the cities, there's not even any work available. In the city, we would not have anyone to turn for help. While here in the country, there is a lot of space for more people to come, because there is plenty of space to work and cultivate.
De los campos que están más concesionados, es de donde salen los
The
alimentos
areas
para
with
toda la
mining
ciudad.
concessions are the areas where food is being produced for all the cities. And if we are killed by the mining companies, what will the city people eat? What will we do? We have grown up here. What could we do with our lives?
Desarrollar nuestra vida.
As we were closing the production of this episode, Energy and Mines Minister Javier Vera resigned amid the serious accusations of corruption we spoke about earlier. In our next chapter, we will visit the rainforest, an area that is one of the most biodiverse on Earth. A place where the Ecuadorian government thought appropriate to place an open pit mine. We will also learn more about the hunger of the market for copper and rare earth minerals. And we will meet a family of indigenous activists defending their lands and standing in the way of a mega project worth billions of dollars. Stay tuned. This is the voice of the resistance